The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as James Mitchell adjusted his red tunic for what felt like the 100th time. At 28 years old, he had been serving as a Queen's Guard for nearly 6 years, and the weight of tradition never failed to humble him. The black bearskin hat sat perfectly atop his head, its 18-inch height making him appear even taller than his already impressive 6'2" frame. James came from a working-class family in Manchester. His father, Robert, had worked double shifts at a textile factory for 30 years, while his mother, Sarah, cleaned offices at night to make ends meet. When James announced his intention to join the military at 18, his parents had mixed feelings. They were proud, but worried about their only son entering such a dangerous profession. The path to becoming a Queen's Guard had not been easy. James first enlisted in the Grenadier Guards, one of the oldest infantry regiments in the British Army. The training was grueling, designed to break down recruits and build them back up as disciplined soldiers. Physical fitness tests pushed candidates to their limits, while mental challenges tested their ability to remain calm under pressure. During his first year, James struggled with the demanding schedule. 5 in the morning wake-up calls were followed by intense physical training, weapons instruction, and endless drilling. Many recruits dropped out, unable to handle the pressure. James persevered, driven by a deep sense of duty and respect for the institution he hoped to serve. The selection process for ceremonial duties was even more rigorous. Candidates underwent psychological evaluations to ensure they could maintain composure while standing motionless for hours. James remembered the day he learned he had been chosen for palace duty. His commanding officer, Colonel Henderson, called him into the office with a stern expression that gave nothing away. "Mitchell," the colonel had said, "you've been selected for ceremonial duties at Buckingham Palace. This is not just about standing still and looking smart. You represent the crown, the military, and the nation. Millions of tourists will see you every year. Some will try to make you laugh, others will attempt to provoke you. Your job is to remain professional at all times." James had nodded, understanding the gravity of the responsibility. The Queen's Guard were more than just tourist attractions. They were active soldiers, trained to defend the royal residences and their occupants. Each guard carried a loaded rifle and was prepared to use it if necessary. The training for ceremonial duties involved learning dozens of precise movements and commands. Guards practiced marching in perfect synchronization, their boots hitting the ground in unison. They studied the history of their regiment, memorizing the battles and honors that had shaped their identity over centuries. James quickly discovered that standing guard was far more challenging than it appeared. The famous stillness required incredible mental discipline. Guards were not allowed to move, speak, or react to external stimuli unless facing a genuine threat. This meant enduring everything from harsh weather to persistent tourists trying to get reactions. His first day on duty had been nerve-wracking. James stood at his assigned post outside the palace, acutely aware of the dozens of cameras pointed in his direction. Tourists gathered around, taking selfies and making jokes in various languages. Some tried to engage him in conversation, while others attempted increasingly elaborate schemes to make him smile or move. One elderly American tourist had spent 15 minutes telling James increasingly ridiculous jokes, apparently convinced that persistence would eventually crack the guard's composure. When that failed, the man tried offering money, which James ignored completely. The tourist finally gave up, muttering about unfriendly British people as he walked away. Over the years, James had witnessed almost everything. Children would wave enthusiastically, their innocent joy bringing warmth to his heart even as his expression remained neutral. Teenagers often dared each other to touch his rifle or try to make him laugh. Adults sometimes behaved worse than children, treating the guards like museum exhibits rather than human beings. The most challenging incidents involved disrespectful visitors who seemed to view the guards as entertainment rather than serving soldiers. James had endured people making inappropriate comments about his uniform, his appearance, and his role. Some tourists treated him like a living statue, posing for photos that crossed boundaries of basic respect. Weather presented another constant challenge. London's unpredictable climate meant guards might face scorching heat, driving rain, or bitter cold during their 2-hour shifts. The heavy woolen uniform and bearskin hat provided little comfort in extreme conditions. James had learned to mentally prepare for discomfort, focusing on his duty rather than physical sensations. The bearskin hat itself was a source of fascination for tourists. Made from the fur of Canadian black bears, each hat cost over £1,000 and was expected to last decades. James treated his with the respect it deserved, understanding that he was wearing a piece of history that connected him to generations of guards who had served before him. Training never truly ended. Guards participated in regular drills to maintain their skills and fitness. They practiced emergency procedures, learning how to respond to various threats while maintaining their ceremonial responsibilities. James had qualified as a marksman and received training in crowd control, first aid, and anti-terrorism procedures. The camaraderie among the guards was strong. They looked out for each other, offering support during difficult shifts and celebrating successes together. James had formed close friendships with his fellow soldiers, bonds forged through shared experiences and mutual respect. Life in the barracks was Spartan but comfortable. Guards shared rooms and ate together in communal dining halls. Off-duty time was precious, offering opportunities to relax, pursue hobbies, or visit family. James often called his parents in Manchester, sharing sanitized versions of his experiences while keeping military details confidential. His mother worried constantly about his safety, while his father expressed quiet pride in his son's achievements. James's younger sister, Emma, worked as a nurse in London and occasionally visited when he had leave. She would tease him about his serious demeanor on duty, claiming she could never maintain such composure while people stared at her all day. The financial benefits of military service had allowed James to help his family in ways that meant everything to him. He sent money home regularly, enabling his parents to reduce their working hours and enjoy some of the comforts they had sacrificed for his education. The knowledge that his service provided real benefits to his loved ones added meaning to even the most challenging days. Personal relationships required careful navigation in military life. James had dated several women over the years, but few understood the demands of his profession. The irregular schedule, security requirements, and emotional discipline required by his role created challenges in forming intimate connections. 2 years earlier, he had met Rebecca, a teacher at a local primary school. She was patient, understanding, and genuinely interested in learning about his experiences without pushing for details he could not share. Their relationship had grown slowly but steadily, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Rebecca never visited him on duty, understanding that personal connections had no place during professional responsibilities. She supported his career choice while maintaining her own independence, pursuing further education to advance in her teaching career. James appreciated her strength and determination, qualities that reminded him of his mother. The Queen's Guard rotation system meant guards served at various royal residences throughout London. James had stood duty at St. James's Palace, the Tower of London, and Windsor Castle. Each location had its unique characteristics and challenges, from the historic atmosphere of the tower to the grandeur of Windsor's staterooms. Windsor Castle held special significance for James. The ancient fortress had been home to British royalty for over 900 years, and walking through its corridors filled him with awe at the continuity of tradition he helped preserve. Standing guard there felt like participating in living history. Public events added complexity to ceremonial duties. James had participated in state visits, official ceremonies, and the Queen's birthday parade. These occasions required additional preparation and coordination with multiple security agencies. The pressure was intense, as any mistake would be witnessed by thousands of spectators and broadcast globally. The changing of the guard ceremony was perhaps the most famous aspect of palace duty. The precise choreography had been refined over centuries, each movement serving both practical and ceremonial purposes. James took pride in the tradition, understanding that tourists traveled from around the world to witness this display of British pageantry. Media attention was a constant reality for guards. Photographers lurked constantly, hoping to capture moments of human weakness or unusual incidents. James had learned to be perpetually camera-ready, knowing that any photograph might appear in newspapers worldwide. The pressure to maintain perfect appearance and behavior at all times was enormous. Training had prepared guards for media intrusion, but the reality was still challenging. James had seen colleagues struggle with unwanted attention after viral videos or photographs circulated online. The anonymity that military service usually provided evaporated when serving in such a public role. Social media had complicated matters further. Tourists now live-streamed their palace visits, broadcasting guard interactions to global audiences in real time. James had to assume that every moment on duty might be recorded and shared, adding another layer of pressure to an already demanding role. The responsibility extended beyond personal behavior to representing the entire institution. guards embodied centuries of military tradition, royal protocol, and national identity. James understood that his actions reflected not just on himself, but on the crown, the army, and Britain itself. This morning felt different somehow, though James could not identify why. Perhaps it was the unusual warmth for late October, or the particularly large crowds gathering for the day's ceremonies. Something in the air suggested that this would not be an ordinary day of duty. As he took his position at the palace gates, James mentally prepared for the hours ahead. The familiar weight of his rifle felt reassuring against his shoulder, while the steady rhythm of tourists gathering beyond the railings provided a comforting backdrop to his vigil. He had no way of knowing that this day would test everything he had learned about duty, dignity, and restraint in ways he had never imagined. The incident that was about to unfold would challenge not just his training but his fundamental beliefs about respect, justice, and the true meaning of service. The sun climbed higher in the sky as more tourists arrived, their excited chatter creating a buzz of anticipation around the palace grounds. James remained motionless at his post, professional and alert, unaware that within hours his name would be known around the world for reasons he could never have anticipated. The morning crowd was typical for a Tuesday in late October. School groups from various European countries mixed with individual tourists, retirees on organized tours, and London locals showing visiting relatives the sights. James had learned to read crowds over his years of service, identifying potential troublemakers before incidents occurred. Most visitors were respectful, maintaining appropriate distances while taking photographs. Parents corralled excited children who wanted to get closer to the colorful guards, explaining in whispered voices about the importance of these soldiers. James appreciated when adults took time to educate young people about the ceremonial traditions they were witnessing. Around 10:30, a black luxury sedan pulled up near the palace gates. The vehicle was expensive, probably costing more than James earned in 2 years. A uniformed chauffeur exited and opened the rear door with practiced efficiency. From the back seat emerged a man in his late 50s, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that screamed wealth and privilege. Victor Ashworth was everything that irritated James about certain types of tourists. His appearance suggested old money and inherited privilege, from his platinum watch to his handmade Italian shoes. More concerning was his demeanor as he surveyed the scene with obvious disdain, as if the palace and its guards existed solely for his entertainment. Ashworth had inherited a fortune from his grandfather's shipping empire, though he had contributed little to expanding the family wealth. He lived between homes in Monaco, Switzerland, and New York, contributing to no community while enjoying the benefits of citizenship in multiple countries. His life was a series of luxury experiences designed to occupy time rather than create meaning. Today's London visit was part of a European tour that had already included private viewings at the Louvre, exclusive dining experiences in Rome, and a helicopter tour of the Swiss Alps. Ashworth collected experiences like trophies, documenting his adventures for social media followers who admired his lifestyle while resenting his privilege. His wife had refused to accompany him on this trip, claiming she was tired of his increasingly arrogant behavior towards service workers and tourists. Their marriage had deteriorated as Ashworth's wealth isolated him from normal human interactions. He treated most people as either obstacles to his pleasure or entertainment for his amusement. The chauffeur had attempted to warn Ashworth about appropriate behavior around the Queen's Guard during the drive from his hotel. Having worked with wealthy clients for 15 years, the driver recognized the signs of someone preparing to cause trouble. Ashworth had dismissed the advice with a wave of his hand, declaring that his money allowed him to do whatever he pleased. As Ashworth approached the palace gates, his attention focused immediately on James. The guard stood perfectly still at his post, rifle at the ready, eyes fixed straight ahead. To most observers, James embodied dignity and professionalism. To Ashworth, he represented an opportunity for amusement at someone else's expense. "Look at this toy soldier," Ashworth announced loudly to no one in particular. His voice carried the entitled tone of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Several tourists turned to look at him, uncomfortable with his aggressive posture toward the guard. James heard the comment, but maintained his position. Years of training had prepared him for verbal provocations. He had been called names, insulted, and threatened by individuals who seemed to view the guards as targets for their frustrations. Professional soldiers learned to ignore such behavior while remaining alert for genuine threats. Ashworth pulled out his phone and began recording as he moved closer to James. "I'm going to show my friends back home how these British robots work," he declared, apparently pleased with his own cleverness. The The phone's camera focused on James's face, looking for any reaction to the verbal assault. "Hey, soldier boy," Ashworth called out. "Don't they pay you enough to afford better clothes? That hat looks like it came from a costume shop." He laughed at his own joke, oblivious to the historical significance of the uniform he was mocking. Several nearby tourists began moving away, sensing the uncomfortable dynamic developing. A family from Japan looked particularly distressed, having traveled thousands of miles to respectfully observe British traditions only to witness this display of casual cruelty. An elderly British couple approached Ashworth with clear disapproval. "Excuse me, sir," the gentleman said politely, "but this young man is a serving soldier. He deserves better treatment than this." Ashworth turned on them with vicious dismissal. "Mind your own business, old man. I've paid taxes that probably fund this little show. I can say whatever I want of the entertainment." The British man's face reddened with anger, but his wife gently pulled him away before the situation escalated further. They moved to a different section of the palace perimeter, shaking their heads at the American's behavior. James remained motionless throughout this exchange, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The insult to the elderly couple bothered him more than the personal attacks. His training emphasized protecting civilians, and watching helpless people being bullied triggered protective instincts that he had to consciously suppress. Emboldened by the lack of response, Ashworth stepped closer to James. "What's the matter? Can't you speak? Did they take away your voice when they gave you that ridiculous uniform?" He was now standing less than 2 feet from the guard, well within the accepted boundaries of respectful observation. Palace security personnel had noticed the developing situation and began moving closer, but protocol required them to allow tourists reasonable access to the guards unless clear violations occurred. Ashworth had not yet crossed legal lines, though his behavior was becoming increasingly inappropriate. James could smell expensive cologne mixed with alcohol on Ashworth's breath. The man had apparently been drinking during his morning tour, which explained his escalating aggression. James made mental note of this information while maintaining his stoic exterior. "I bet you can't even use that gun," Ashworth continued, gesturing toward James's rifle. "They probably gave you a toy to complete the costume. Real soldiers fight wars, not stand around like mannequins for tourist photos." This comment struck particularly deep because James had served in Afghanistan before being selected for ceremonial duties. He had seen combat, lost friends to improvised explosive devices, and carried emotional scars that he rarely discussed. The suggestion that his current role diminished his military credentials was both ignorant and personally painful. Ashworth seemed to sense he had found a sensitive topic. "That's it, isn't it? You're not a real soldier at all. This is just a job for people who couldn't handle actual military service. You're basically a theme park employee in a fancy costume." The accusation was completely false and deeply insulting to someone who had risked his life for his country. James had volunteered for dangerous missions, earned commendations for bravery, and served with distinction in one of the world's most challenging military environments. His current assignment was considered an honor, reserved for soldiers who had demonstrated exceptional discipline and dedication. Several other tourists had gathered to watch the confrontation, though most looked uncomfortable rather than entertained. A group of American college students seemed particularly embarrassed by their compatriots' behavior, whispering among themselves about how to distance themselves from the scene. Ashworth noticed his growing audience and played to them like a performer. "Watch this, everyone. I'm going to prove these guards are just actors." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, all high-denomination bills that he fanned out dramatically. "How much to break character?" he asked James directly. £50. 100? Everyone has a price, and I bet yours isn't very high given how little they probably pay you for this nonsense. The offer of money crossed several ethical and legal boundaries. Attempting to bribe a serving soldier was a serious offense, while the public nature of the act made it even more egregious. James knew that palace security would now be required to intervene if the situation continued escalating. However, Ashworth was not finished with his performance. Frustrated by James's continued lack of response, he decided to escalate his tactics. The alcohol in his system, combined with his natural arrogance and the attention from other tourists, drove him toward an action that would have consequences far beyond anything he imagined. "You know what?" Ashworth announced loudly. "I think you people have forgotten who really matters in this world. Your whole country depends on tourists like me bringing money here. Without us, you'd have nothing but rain and terrible food." He stepped even closer to James, now violating the guard's personal space in a way that bordered on physical intimidation. I think it's time someone reminded you of your proper place in the world." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and several tourists instinctively moved backward, sensing that something was about to happen. Palace security personnel began walking more quickly toward the scene, but they were still several yards away. James felt the familiar calm that descended during moments of high stress. His military training had taught him to slow down time mentally, processing threats and options with enhanced clarity. He could sense Ashworth preparing for some kind of physical action, and every muscle in his body prepared to respond appropriately. The American tourist's face showed a mixture of anger, entitlement, and cruel amusement as he considered his next move. He had spent his entire life believing that wealth gave him the right to treat others however he pleased, and this British soldier's refusal to acknowledge his superiority had become a personal affront that demanded dramatic response. Ashworth's hand moved toward his mouth in a gesture that would soon shock everyone present and launch a chain of events that neither man could have predicted. The next few seconds would test everything James had learned about duty, restraint, and the true meaning of dignity under pressure. The morning sun continued to shine down on the palace courtyard, illuminating a scene that was about to become one of the most discussed incidents in recent Royal Guard history. Neither the wealthy tourist nor the professional soldier realized that their confrontation would soon capture the attention of millions around the world. The moment arrived with shocking suddenness. Ashworth gathered saliva in his mouth, pulled back his head, and spat directly at James's face. The projectile hit the guard just below his left eye, running down his cheek in a disgusting display of contempt that left every witness stunned into silence. For several seconds, nobody moved. The tourists who had been watching the confrontation stood frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The casual cruelty of the act was so unexpected and degrading that it seemed to suspend time itself. James felt the warm moisture on his skin, but maintained his position. His training had prepared him for many scenarios, but this level of personal degradation tested every limit of his professional composure. The urge to retaliate was overwhelming, every instinct screaming for immediate response to such a vile assault on his dignity. The saliva continued its slow journey down his cheek as James made the most important decision of his military career. He could respond with violence, which would be justified, but would violate everything he stood for as a professional soldier. He could break protocol and speak, which would satisfy his emotional need for response, but compromise his duty. Or he could do something that no one expected. Instead of reacting with anger or breaking his stoic composure, James did something extraordinary. He slowly turned his head slightly toward Ashworth, looked directly into the man's eyes, and smiled. Not a mocking or aggressive smile, but a genuine expression of pity and understanding that cut through the tension like a blade. The smile said everything that words could not. It acknowledged the pathetic nature of Ashworth's behavior while demonstrating that no amount of degradation could diminish James's dignity. It showed strength rather than weakness, control rather than helplessness, and wisdom rather than ignorance. Ashworth's triumphant expression faltered as he realized his act had not achieved the desired effect. He had expected anger, retaliation, or at least visible distress. Instead, he faced a response that made him appear small and desperate while elevating his victim to moral heights he could never reach. "What are you smiling at?" Ashworth demanded, his voice cracking slightly. The confident aggression from moments before had evaporated, replaced by confusion and growing unease. "I just showed you what I think of your stupid costume parade." James maintained his gentle smile while slowly reaching into his pocket. The movement was deliberate and calm, drawing every eye to his actions. Ashworth stepped back instinctively, suddenly, unsure of what the guard might do in response to such provocation. From his pocket, James withdrew a pristine white handkerchief, folded with military precision. He handed it to Ashworth with the same respectful gesture he might use when assisting an elderly person or helping a lost child. The offering was made without words, but communicated volumes about character and dignity. "Here," James said quietly, speaking for the first time during the entire encounter. His voice was steady and kind, without a trace of anger or resentment. "You seem to have something on your chin." The simple statement was delivered with such grace that it transformed the entire dynamic of the situation. Instead of descending to Ashworth's level of cruelty, James had elevated the moment into something approaching poetry. His response demonstrated that true strength lay not in retaliation, but in maintaining one's principles under pressure. Ashworth stared at the offered handkerchief as if it were a foreign object. The gesture was so unexpected and generous that it left him completely off balance. He had prepared for anger, threats, or physical confrontation. He had no defense against kindness. I don't. Ashworth stammered, his previous eloquence abandoning him completely. The handkerchief seemed to glow in the morning sunlight, representing everything noble and decent that he had just attacked through his disgusting behavior. The watching tourists began to understand what they were witnessing. This was not just a guard maintaining discipline under assault. This was a demonstration of character that transcended military training. Several people began recording with their phones, sensing they were documenting something extraordinary. An elderly German tourist started clapping slowly, the sound echoing across the courtyard. Others joined in, creating a spontaneous applause that grew in volume and intensity. They were not just appreciating James's professionalism, but celebrating his humanity in the face of degradation. Ashworth looked around at the growing crowd, suddenly, aware that their sympathy had shifted completely. Where moments before he had commanded attention through shock and cruelty, now he stood isolated and diminished while the guard he had attacked became the focus of admiration and respect. "Take the handkerchief," James said gently, still holding it out. "Everyone deserves a chance to clean up their mistakes." The word mistakes hung in the air with particular weight. James was offering more than fabric. He was providing an opportunity for redemption that few people would extend to someone who had just humiliated them so publicly. Palace security finally reached the scene, but their intervention was no longer needed. The situation had been resolved through grace rather than force, leaving them to marvel at James's handling of the crisis. The senior officer, Sergeant Williams, had served for 20 years but had never seen anything like this response to such provocation. Ashworth's hand trembled as he reached for the handkerchief. The simple act of accepting it would acknowledge his wrong behavior while accepting charity from his victim. His pride fought against the gesture, but something deeper in his conscience recognized the profound nature of what was being offered. "Why?" Ashworth asked, his voice barely audible. "Why would you help me after what I did?" James's smile softened further, becoming almost paternal despite being decades younger than the man before him. "Because that's what decent people do," he replied. "We help each other, even when we don't deserve it." The words struck Ashworth like physical blows. In that moment, he saw himself clearly for perhaps the first time in years. The guard's response had stripped away every justification and excuse he had ever used for his behavior, leaving him face to face with the reality of what he had become. Ashworth took the handkerchief with shaking hands and wiped his chin mechanically. The fabric was soft and clean, carrying the faint scent of military-issue laundry soap. Such a simple object, yet it represented everything he lacked: dignity, honor, and basic human decency. "I'm sorry," Ashworth whispered, the words barely audible. It was perhaps the first genuine apology he had offered in decades, and it felt foreign on his tongue. "I'm so very sorry." James nodded once, acknowledging the apology without making a show of forgiveness. "We all make mistakes, sir. What matters is what we do next." The crowd continued to watch in fascination as this extraordinary drama played out. Several tourists were crying, moved by the display of grace under pressure. The contrast between Ashworth's cruelty and James's kindness had created a moment of moral clarity that touched everyone present. A young woman from the group of American college students approached hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said to Ashworth, "but I'm ashamed that you're representing my country here. This soldier showed more class in 5 minutes than you've probably shown in your entire life." Her words were harsh, but delivered with the passion of someone who genuinely cared about justice and decency. Ashworth absorbed the criticism without defending himself, perhaps recognizing that his behavior had indeed been indefensible. More tourists began speaking up, creating a chorus of condemnation for Ashworth's actions and praise for James's response. The spontaneous reaction demonstrated humanity's instinctive appreciation for genuine virtue when confronted with obvious vice. Ashworth found himself completely isolated, surrounded by people who had witnessed his cruelty and James's grace. The handkerchief in his hand felt heavier with each passing moment, weighted with the moral implications of what it represented. "What's your name?" Ashworth asked James suddenly. "I need to know the name of the man who just taught me the most important lesson of my life." "James Mitchell, sir," the guard replied formally. "But names don't matter as much as actions. You have the chance to act differently from now on." The formal address of "sir," even after such treatment, emphasized James's commitment to respect and dignity regardless of how others behaved. It was a final demonstration that his character was unshakable, independent of external circumstances. Ashworth looked down at the handkerchief, then back at James's kind face. Something fundamental shifted inside him during that exchange of glances. The wall of entitlement and arrogance that he had built around himself began to crumble, replaced by something he had not felt in years, shame mixed with hope for redemption. "I don't deserve this kindness," Ashworth said, his voice breaking slightly. "I came here thinking I was better than everyone else, and you've shown me that I'm probably the worst person here." James shook his head gently. "Nobody's the worst person, sir. We all have the capacity for both good and evil. Today you chose poorly, but tomorrow you can choose better." The philosophical depth of James's response revealed an intelligence and wisdom that transcended his formal education. His understanding of human nature came from experience, observation, and a naturally generous spirit that refused to write off even those who attacked him. Sergeant Williams stepped forward, recognizing that the situation had resolved itself in the most extraordinary way possible. "Sir," he said to Ashworth, "I think it would be best if you moved along now. Guard Mitchell has shown remarkable restraint, but other officers might not be so understanding." The warning was delivered professionally but carried the clear implication that Ashworth's behavior had crossed legal lines. His assault on a serving soldier could result in serious charges if pressed, though everyone present understood that James would never pursue such action. Ashworth nodded slowly, understanding that his time at the palace had ended. He looked once more at James, trying to memorize the face of the man who had changed his life in the space of a few minutes. "Thank you," he said simply. "I'll never forget this." James nodded respectfully as Ashworth turned and walked slowly toward his waiting car. The crowd parted to let him pass, their expressions ranging from disgust to pity. The chauffeur opened the door with professional neutrality, though his eyes showed clear disapproval of his employer's behavior. As the luxury sedan pulled away, carrying Ashworth back to his hotel and his empty life of privilege, James resumed his position at the palace gates. The crowd gradually dispersed, though many tourists lingered to take respectful photographs and express their admiration for what they had witnessed. The handkerchief had served its purpose and would never be returned, becoming a tangible reminder of grace in action that Ashworth would treasure for the rest of his life. Within hours of the incident, videos of James's extraordinary response began circulating on social media platforms worldwide. The German tourist who had started the applause had recorded the entire exchange, and her footage captured every detail of the confrontation and its remarkable resolution. The video went viral with unprecedented speed. Within 6 hours, it had been viewed over 2 million times across various platforms. Comments poured in from people around the globe, expressing admiration for James's grace under pressure and disgust at Ashworth's behavior. The incident became a symbol of dignity, triumphing over entitlement. News organizations picked up the story immediately. The BBC led with the headline, "Queen's Guard shows extraordinary grace after tourist attack," while international outlets focused on different aspects of the encounter. American media emphasized their embarrassment at Ashworth's behavior, while European broadcasters celebrated James's response as exemplifying the best of British values. James remained unaware of his growing fame as he continued his duty shift. Palace protocol required guards to surrender personal devices during active service, protecting them from distractions that might compromise their vigilance. He stood at his post throughout the afternoon, professionally greeting the increasing number of tourists who approached with respectful admiration. Colonel Henderson received his first phone call about the incident at 2 o'clock that afternoon. The caller was a journalist from the Times, seeking comment about the guard's remarkable response to assault. Henderson had heard nothing about any incident and immediately contacted Palace Security for details. Sergeant Williams provided a full briefing about the morning's events, emphasizing James's exemplary conduct throughout the confrontation. "I've never seen anything like it, sir," Williams reported. The guard maintained perfect discipline while showing extraordinary humanity. It was textbook military bearing combined with genuine character. Henderson felt a mixture of pride and concern as he absorbed the details. Pride in James's representation of military values, but concern about the media attention that would inevitably follow. High-profile incidents involving royal guards always attracted scrutiny that could complicate their primary mission of security and ceremony. Meanwhile, Ashworth sat in his luxury hotel room, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at him seemed different somehow, as if the morning's events had physically altered his appearance. The shame he felt was overwhelming, a crushing weight that made breathing difficult. He had dismissed his chauffeur immediately upon returning to the hotel, unable to face the man's politely concealed disgust. The driver had served wealthy clients for 15 years, but had never witnessed such degrading behavior from an employer. His professionalism prevented him from commenting, but his silence spoke volumes. Ashworth's phone buzzed constantly with notifications, but he ignored them all. Social media alerts, news articles, and messages from acquaintances who had recognized him in the viral videos created an electronic storm that he was not prepared to face. His name was becoming synonymous with entitled cruelty, while James's was associated with dignified grace. The contrast between the two men's reputations developing in real time was stark and painful. James was being celebrated as a hero who embodied the best of human nature, while Ashworth was becoming a symbol of everything wrong with privilege and wealth. The irony was not lost on him that his attempt to humiliate the guard had resulted in his own public humiliation. Rebecca first learned about the incident when a colleague showed her the video during their lunch break. Her heart swelled with pride as she watched James handle the assault with such dignity and grace. She had always known he possessed exceptional character, but seeing it demonstrated under such pressure filled her with overwhelming admiration and love. "That's my boyfriend," she told her stunned colleagues. "That's the man I love." The declaration felt like the most important words she had ever spoken. Watching James's response to such provocation had crystallized her feelings in a way that months of normal dating could not achieve. She knew she wanted to spend her life with someone who possessed such fundamental decency. James's parents learned about their son's fame through a phone call from their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who had seen the story on evening news. "Your boy's on television," she announced breathlessly. "He's done something wonderful at the palace." Robert and Sarah Mitchell watched the footage with tears streaming down their faces. They had always been proud of their son's military service, but seeing him respond to such cruelty with kindness and dignity exceeded their highest hopes for his character. The working-class values they had instilled in him had been tested in the most public way possible, and he had proven worthy of their trust. "That's our boy," Sarah whispered to her husband. "That's the man we raised." Social media response was overwhelmingly positive toward James and harshly critical of Ashworth. Celebrities, politicians, and ordinary citizens shared the video with comments praising the guard's extraordinary self-control and humanity. The hashtag dignity under pressure began trending globally as people used James's example to discuss broader themes of respect, character, and grace. Military personnel from around the world expressed particular admiration for James's conduct. Veterans shared their own experiences with difficult civilians, noting how easily the situation could have escalated into something tragic. James's ability to defuse tension while maintaining his dignity impressed professional soldiers who understood the challenges of ceremonial duty. However, not all responses were positive. Some commenters criticized James for not responding more aggressively to the assault, arguing that Ashworth deserved physical retaliation. These voices were quickly drowned out by the majority who recognized the superior strength required to respond with kindness rather than violence. Colonel Henderson arrived at the palace that evening to personally congratulate James as his shift ended. The meeting took place in a private office away from tourist areas, allowing them to speak freely about the day's events. "Mitchell," Henderson began, "I've served in this army for 25 years, and I've never been prouder of a soldier under my command. What you did today embodied everything we stand for as guardsmen and as human beings." James stood at attention, still processing the day's events. "Thank you, sir. I simply tried to do what seemed right in the moment." Henderson smiled at the modest response. "What seemed right to you today will be studied in military academies for years to come. You've shown the world what true strength looks like." The colonel explained the media attention that was building around the incident, preparing James for the challenges that would come with sudden fame. Requests for interviews were already pouring in from news organizations worldwide, and the palace press office was coordinating responses to manage the story appropriately. "You have a choice to make," Henderson continued. "You can speak publicly about what happened, or you can let your actions speak for themselves. Either path has merit, but you need to decide what feels right for you." James considered the options carefully. Part of him wanted to use the attention to discuss the broader issues of respect and dignity that the incident had highlighted. Another part preferred to let the moment stand on its own without further commentary that might diminish its impact. As news of the incident spread, donations began pouring into military charities in James's name. People around the world wanted to express their appreciation for his conduct, and many chose to honor him by supporting organizations that helped veterans and active duty personnel. The Royal British Legion reported receiving over £50,000 in donations within 24 hours of the video's publication. Similar organizations in other countries experienced comparable surges in support as the story resonated with people who admired James's values. Ashworth spent that evening reading every news article and social media post about the incident. The comments were brutal and well-deserved, forcing him to confront the reality of his behavior and its impact on others. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he faced genuine consequences for his actions. The hotel concierge had discreetly informed him that several guests had complained about his presence, having recognized him from the viral videos. The manager suggested that he might be more comfortable at a different establishment, a polite way of asking him to leave without creating another public incident. Ashworth packed his belongings mechanically, his mind replaying the morning's events repeatedly. James's smile haunted him, not because it was mocking or cruel, but because it represented everything he had never been. The guard's grace had exposed the poverty of his own character in ways that no amount of wealth could remedy. The handkerchief sat on the hotel room's desk, carefully folded and somehow sacred in its simplicity. Ashworth had carried it with him throughout the day, unable to explain why it had become so important. The fabric represented possibilities he had never considered: redemption, change, and the hope that even he might become a better person. As he prepared to leave London, Ashworth made a decision that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. Instead of fleeing to one of his other homes to hide from the scandal, he would stay in the city and try to find a way to make amends for his behavior. The process would not be easy or quick. A lifetime of entitlement and arrogance could not be erased overnight. But James's example had shown him that change was possible for anyone willing to make the effort. The guard's kindness had planted a seed of conscience that might, with careful tending, grow into something worthy of respect. James returned to his barracks that evening, still unaware of the global impact his actions had created. His fellow guards greeted him with a mixture of admiration and good-natured teasing, having heard about the incident through military channels. Their respect for his handling of the situation was genuine and deeply felt. "Mitchell," called out Guardsman Thompson, "I hear you've made us all famous today. Better get used to crowds, because everyone's going to want to see the guard who conquered cruelty with kindness." The prediction proved accurate. In the days that followed, tourist numbers at Buckingham Palace increased dramatically as people traveled from around the world hoping to see James, and the location where dignity had triumphed over degradation in such a powerful and public way. 3 months after the incident, James's life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. The video of his confrontation with Ashworth had been viewed over 50 million times, making it one of the most watched displays of human dignity in social media history. His response had transcended the original incident to become a symbol of grace under pressure that people referenced in contexts far beyond military service. Letters arrived at the palace daily from around the world. Children wrote to thank him for showing them how to handle bullies with kindness rather than violence. Adults shared stories of how his example had inspired them to respond better to difficult situations in their own lives. Military families expressed gratitude for his positive representation of service members everywhere. James read every letter personally, moved by the profound impact his split-second decision had created. A teacher from Australia wrote that she now used the video in her classroom to discuss character and moral courage. A businessman from Germany explained how James's example had changed his approach to dealing with difficult employees, emphasizing dignity over dominance. The most meaningful correspondence came from fellow veterans who understood the unique challenges of maintaining composure under attack. Many shared their own experiences with difficult civilians, noting how James's response had elevated the entire military community in public perception. His actions had reminded the world that strength could be demonstrated through restraint rather than retaliation. Rebecca had watched her boyfriend navigate sudden fame with the same grace he had shown during the original incident. Television producers offered lucrative contracts for exclusive interviews, publishers proposed book deals, and speaking agencies promised substantial fees for public appearances. James declined them all, preferring to let his actions speak without additional commentary. "I did what anyone should do in that situation," he told Rebecca one evening as they walked through a quiet London park. "I don't need to profit from basic human decency." His modesty only increased public admiration for his character. In an age of manufactured celebrity and constant self-promotion, James's reluctance to capitalize on his fame seemed refreshingly authentic. The contrast between his humility and Ashworth's previous arrogance provided yet another lesson in the difference between genuine class and mere wealth. The British public embraced James as a national hero, but the recognition extended far beyond his home country. The French government awarded him honorary citizenship for exemplifying universal human values. The German chancellor referenced his response in a speech about international cooperation. Even countries with complicated relationships with Britain praised James's demonstration of dignity and restraint. Military promotions followed the public recognition. James was advanced to sergeant ahead of schedule, with commendations noting his exceptional service and positive representation of British values. The promotion came with increased responsibilities and opportunities for specialized training that would enhance his career prospects significantly. More importantly for James personally, the incident had crystallized his relationship with Rebecca. Her unwavering support during the media attention, combined with her pride in his character, had strengthened their bond immeasurably. 6 weeks after the incident, James proposed marriage during a quiet dinner at their favorite restaurant. "I want to spend my life with someone who possesses your courage and kindness," he told her as he knelt with his grandmother's ring. "Will you marry a simple soldier who got famous for doing the right thing?" Rebecca's tearful acceptance marked the beginning of planning for a wedding that would have to accommodate significant public interest. The couple decided on a small ceremony for family and close friends, with a larger reception that would allow military colleagues and supporters to celebrate with them. Meanwhile, Victor Ashworth had undergone a transformation that amazed everyone who knew him. The shame of his public humiliation had sparked genuine soul-searching that led to dramatic changes in his behavior and priorities. The handkerchief James had given him remained in his possession, serving as a daily reminder of grace received when least deserved. Ashworth had spent weeks trying to find an appropriate way to apologize more formally to James. His initial attempts through military channels were politely declined, as James preferred to let the matter rest. Frustrated but determined, Ashworth decided to demonstrate his remorse through actions rather than words. He established a foundation dedicated to supporting military families, with particular focus on veterans transitioning to civilian life. The initial funding came from the sale of one of his luxury homes, with ongoing support from diverted personal expenses that had previously funded his extravagant lifestyle. The Victor Ashworth Foundation funded educational programs, provided emergency financial assistance, and supported mental health services for current and former military personnel. The Foundation's mission statement explicitly referenced James's example of grace under pressure as inspiration for the organization's commitment to dignity and service. Ashworth also began volunteering at a veterans support center in London, initially meeting resistance from skeptical staff who questioned his motives. His persistence and genuine commitment gradually won acceptance, as he proved willing to perform unglamorous tasks without seeking recognition or praise. The work was transformative for Ashworth, who discovered purpose and meaning he had never experienced during his previous life of leisure and entitlement. Interactions with veterans struggling with various challenges humbled him daily, while providing perspective on real problems faced by people who had sacrificed for others. His marriage, previously strained by his arrogance and selfishness, began to heal as his wife witnessed genuine changes in his character. The couple entered counseling together, working to rebuild trust and communication that had been damaged by years of superficial interaction and mutual resentment. "I finally married the man I thought you were when we met 30 years ago," his wife told him after a particularly productive counseling session. "It took public humiliation for you to find your conscience, but at least you found it." The Foundation's work attracted attention from other wealthy individuals inspired by Ashworth's transformation. Several former associates, motivated by his example of using privilege for service rather than self-indulgence, established their own charitable initiatives focused on supporting those in need rather than simply accumulating more wealth. James learned about Ashworth's Foundation activities through news reports, but maintained his policy of not commenting publicly on his confrontation with the wealthy tourist. However, he privately expressed approval for the man's apparent change of heart, noting to Rebecca that redemption should be celebrated rather than questioned when it appeared genuine. A year after the incident, James was invited to address a gathering of military academy cadets about leadership and character under pressure. His speech, the first extensive public comments he made about the confrontation, focused on the importance of maintaining personal values regardless of external circumstances. True strength isn't about how much force you can apply, James told the young future officers. It's about choosing restraint when retaliation would be easier. It's about maintaining your dignity when others try to strip it away. It's about remembering that your character is defined by how you treat people, especially those who cannot or will not treat you well in return. The speech was recorded and widely shared, adding another layer to James's growing reputation as a moral exemplar. Military leaders from multiple countries requested copies to use in their own training programs, while civilian organizations adapted his message for corporate leadership development. James's parents attended the Academy speech, their pride in their son's achievements overwhelming and deeply felt. The working-class couple from Manchester found themselves seated with generals, politicians, and dignitaries who sought their perspectives on raising a child with such exceptional character. "We just taught him to be kind," Sarah Mitchell told a reporter who asked about their parenting philosophy. "James has always been willing to help others, even when it cost him something. We're proud that he stayed true to himself when the whole world was watching." The incident's anniversary became an unofficial day of reflection on dignity and grace under pressure. Schools organized discussions about character and restraint, while military units used the date for training exercises focused on de-escalation and professional conduct. Social media filled with people sharing their own stories of choosing kindness over retaliation, using James's example as inspiration for better responses to daily frustrations and conflicts. The hashtag James Mitchell Challenge encouraged people to respond to negativity with unexpected grace, creating a global movement toward more thoughtful human interaction. Ashworth participated in the anniversary observances by announcing a significant expansion of his foundation's activities. The organization had grown to employ dozens of full-time staff members and had helped thousands of military families navigate various challenges. His transformation from entitled tourist to dedicated philanthropist had become almost as remarkable as James's original response to the assault. 5 years after the incident, James retired from active military service to pursue a career in veteran advocacy and youth mentoring. His reputation for integrity and wisdom had created opportunities to serve former military personnel struggling with civilian transitions, while his natural teaching ability made him effective at helping young people develop character and resilience. Rebecca, now his wife and the mother of their twin daughters, supported his career transition while pursuing her own advancement in education. The couple had built a marriage based on mutual respect and shared values, with James's fame never overwhelming their fundamental partnership and love. Their wedding had indeed attracted significant public attention, but the couple managed to maintain privacy while acknowledging public support for their relationship. The ceremony featured military traditions alongside personal touches that reflected their individual personalities and shared commitment to service. Ashworth attended James's retirement ceremony, having been invited as a representative of the foundation that had grown from his shame into genuine service. The two men spoke briefly and cordially, their interaction demonstrating the possibility of redemption and forgiveness even after serious wrongdoing. "Thank you for showing me who I could become," Ashworth told James during their private conversation. "Your kindness saved my soul when I didn't deserve salvation." James accepted the gratitude graciously while deflecting credit for Ashworth's transformation. "You saved yourself," he replied. "I just gave you a handkerchief. Everything that came after was your choice to be better." The original handkerchief, now framed and displayed in Ashworth's office, continued to serve as a daily reminder of grace received and responsibility to extend similar grace to others. Visitors to the foundation offices often asked about the simple white cloth, providing opportunities to share the story of transformation and redemption that had grown from one moment of unexpected kindness. James's legacy extended far beyond the original viral video to encompass a worldwide conversation about dignity, character, and the power of choosing grace over retaliation. His example had inspired countless individuals to respond to adversity with integrity rather than anger, creating ripple effects of positive human interaction that would continue for generations. The incident that began with cruelty and humiliation had ultimately generated more kindness and understanding than anyone could have predicted. James Mitchell's smile in the face of assault had become a symbol of humanity's capacity for grace under pressure, proving that true strength lay not in the ability to inflict harm, but in the wisdom to choose healing instead.